Welcome to the latest of my Inside Tracks. Today I'm going to explore Venus's exciting journey through the free-spirited sign of Sagittarius, which begins at 8:14 p.m. on the 30th of November. It's going to go on through to the 24th of December, Christmas Eve, when it moves into the earthy Capricorn. Venus is very much about our relationships, of course, through its rulership of Libra, but it's also about our values, self-worth, but also it is about everyday money through its rulership of Taurus. But in the sign of Sagittarius, which of course is a fire sign, immutable, it's peregrine, therefore it's unrooted. It doesn't really want to be owned in the way that Venus in Taurus does. It wants to be a free spirit. And in terms of relationships, well, here too, maybe it wants to be that much more independent than Venus in Libra likes, which is very collaborative. So that's intriguing. But in the run-up to Christmas, Venus in Sagittarius joining up with the Sun, but also the thrust of Mars, can certainly give us a desire to widen our horizons, meet up with different types of people, have lots of friendly and gregarious interaction, and can be very playful and fun. If you're someone who's very experimental around relationships, you may well have Venus in your natal chart in Sagittarius, or perhaps in the 9th house, but particularly not in a fixed zodiac sign. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. I'm going to take you all through this. I'm also going to share with you the event chart from a natal perspective, which puts Venus in house 5, which in itself is very playful and could be very romantic, but also from a solar perspective, pitching Venus in house 9. I'm then going to share with you the upcoming aspects. We have two straight away. Venus is forging a very potentially turbulent opposition to Uranus, a magical one to Neptune, and perhaps a very positive one on the 2nd of December to Pluto. But as we go deeper into December, Venus is going to come into some heavy celestial traffic. And if a relationship has been somewhat challenged, whether it's around a friendship or a romance, as the month goes on, it could reach a crunch point. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have your company. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please help it to continue to thrive. We burst through the 133k mark, but please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Your comments and likes are truly appreciated. Year 2026 is racing up. Please check out your free deep dive video for each of the tile signs by seeing the link beneath this video. Also, go to my new website at patrickarundell.com and you can sign up for your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning. My special offer for your personal horoscope for year 2026 is still live. Please see the link below for that too. So Venus in Sagittarius can be very friendly, certainly has an interest in keeping things lively and stimulating. If you are someone who likes your own space, that's going to be something that becomes more important. But the immediate opposition to Uranus in the sign of Taurus suggests in a close relationship, if one of you has a different aptitude or desire, particularly around the festive budget, to splash out and be generous, it could cause tensions. But also Venus moving into the sign of Sagittarius comes after it's been going through a sign it's detrimented in of Scorpio. And if you have been experiencing some very heavy vibes, particularly around things like jealousy, possessiveness and control, there may be a real desire with the opposition to Uranus to actually break free, maybe to have some initial space. But if a relationship has been really bumping along the bottom, it could be a desire to free yourself permanently. And because Venus begins this journey in Sagittarius in a beautiful trine to Neptune, the chances are that many of us are going to want to know the truth of our relationships at this time, because Venus in Sagittarius can be very much a truth seeker, but also we can be very idealistic. And if the brutal reality of a relationship is proving not to be much fun, another reason to create a little bit of space. But then again, Venus is forging a stunning alliance to Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. Sagittarius and Aquarius have commonalities, can be both quite forward and to the point in expressing opinions, but also have a love of space and freedom and perhaps an openness to unusual types of relationships. But that link between Venus and Pluto suggests if you're connecting to someone through your philosophies, beliefs, or through travel, the chances are if you're heading off for some winter sun or snow with a group of people that you feel very aligned to, it could prove to be a lot of fun. So Venus in Sagittarius, let's just think about the enthusiasm of the ruler of the sign of Sagittarius, Jupiter. It likes to see things in an upbeat and therefore gregarious way, so that's absolutely lovely. And having that truthfulness in any kind of relationship is also important too. But that could mean that if one person in a close tie does want to connect with others, be a bit more interactive, and the other person perhaps is a bit more of a home lover, that too could cause some tensions. So on the screen now I'm showing the event chart from a natal perspective, and you can see there the gathering of the players in Sagittarius, Venus, the Sun and Mars. And Venus in the 5th house can be very glamorous, and if you have been feeling that it's time to give yourself some kind of fresh makeover, even if you consider yourself to be a dedicated follower of fashion, this is pushing you to be a bit more daring in your choices. So that's delicious. And if we look up to that position of Neptune, Neptune's in the 9th house, which has an echo of the sign of Sagittarius, so that's lovely. And we also have the ascendant in the sign of Leo, so an echo of the 5th house where the Sun, Mars and Venus are as well. So potentially very playful. So that's really, really lovely indeed. But look at that position of Uranus. And because in the event chart Uranus is in the 11th house, it could be around a friendship where we do feel that someone's been a little bit too clingy, perhaps a bit too demanding of our attention, and that need just to be more spontaneous, which can come from Venus in Sagittarius, may at the least, as I say, give us the desire for a bit of space, even if not for a permanent breakdown in the time. Now on the screen now we're seeing the solar illustration. Of course, Venus in house 9, there's Neptune in 12, we also have Uranus in the 2nd house, so that brings into play the potential for where there are clashes of philosophies around finance or even just values. But what we're going to get as Venus makes her way deeper into the sign of Sagittarius and deeper into the month of December is we are going to see Venus trying to chase the tails of the Sun in Sagittarius, and they get very close together in week 3, but they never quite meet, so we don't get a Venus cazimi, we don't get the exact conjunction. But what we do get is a square with Saturn, and that becomes exact on the 21st of December. And we've also got Neptune squaring up with Venus on the 24th. How ironic that when this journey begins, our idealism is definitely being amplified with Venus and Neptune in the trine as we get to just before Christmas Day. Perhaps any illusions we may have had around someone's intentions or perhaps even faithfulness may be starkly revealed for what they are, and that is because of having Saturn in house 12, where things can be shielded, disguised, hidden, coming into conflict with Venus and the Sun, and previous until the 15th of the month with Mars in Sagittarius. All of that is going to see right through the month things that we might not necessarily want to look at being pushed in our direction for us to confront them, because that's where the frankness of Sagittarius can come in, and that's where the wound, which can be Saturn in Pisces, the culminative zodiac sign, very psychological, and if someone has been holding in some resentments, they could really bubble to the surface just as we get to Christmas. So if there is a relationship you're involved with where you're not really sure that someone is being upfront, clear, transparent, totally committed, or resisting a need for one of the partners to have a little bit of time to be playful with their friends, maybe it's to do with a works event for the festivities, and if there is a sense of limitation, that can definitely cause at the least some resentment. But if there are relationships where things have been kept out of sight, such as affairs, such as dishonesty, to do with a lack of transparency, they are going to come into the open through this month. So it's a pretty complex month with this Sagittarius energy, which particularly with Mars through to the 15th of December demands things to be open and to the fore, and that shielded energy of Saturn initially and then Neptune, which can create in the square to Venus distortion, deception, to be honest. So if you do meet someone, and the chances are if you're footloose and fancy free and you are heading off somewhere different and you're partying, it could be very flirty and it could be a lot of fun. And if you just want to live in the moment and enjoy it for what it is, that's all good and dandy. But if you are looking for something that's more committed, more devoted to one individual person, well, Venus in Sagittarius can resist that unless there is that meeting of philosophies or an understanding. Each of us as individuals will always have a part of us that we need to keep for ourselves, and that's what Venus in Sagittarius reminds us of. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect through to the 24th of December. And so please do check out your year 2026 deep dive forecast for each of the 12 signs by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Aries Venus moving into Sagittarius can work in a number of ways. The reception committee, of course, includes the Sun, but also your ruler Mars. Mars in the 9th house really likes adventure and can be very much on the front foot about going for it. So I feel what Venus is going to do is just enhance that. But Venus can be about our senses. The 9th house can be about travel, whether it's heading off for some festive shopping in a different location, or going away for a long weekend, or even a holiday. And because of the more sensory vibe of Venus, if you are in a different place, you can just really download that experience in a very vivid but very stimulating way. So that's gorgeous. But Venus, of course, can be about relationships. And if you have been encountering a lot of intensity of late, one of the things you might want to do is just try to change things up. And even if that is with the same person, so that's a great plan as well. But if you have been processing more recently, but particularly the last couple of years, the fact with Saturn, but also Neptune, and more recently the North Node, all in your 12th house, if you have been processing things from your past, perhaps your history, just really working through things, decompressing them, one of the things that may have come up for you would have been relationships, and perhaps relationships that didn't work out, or people who are no longer with us. So you may have felt very nostalgic at times, or very sensitive. But I feel what Venus in Sagittarius is doing is giving you permission, if you can, to perhaps move on a little bit. If you've really owned some of that more challenging and sad events from the past, Venus here is really saying, okay, that's really noble that you did that, but do give yourself a chance to enjoy something afresh, exciting and fun, which Venus in Sagittarius can very much be. However, there's another strand. If you are seeing someone and you're not absolutely sure of how committed they are to you, and there is a doubt, I think over the next 3 or 4 weeks those doubts will have to be confronted head on. And it's not just because of Venus, it's because Saturn is going to square with Mars, but also with the Sun, and then Venus will square with Neptune. So if you're not utterly sure about where someone is coming from and whether they're totally committed to you or whether you're totally committed to them, I think by Christmas you will have to look at that and really confront it in a head-on way, because that's what Sagittarius is like. But of course, you know, you can be very bold And I think if you are looking for just a spark of excitement, and if you are footloose and fancy free, there's definitely some great fun to be had over the next few weeks. But just be aware of your motivations and those of anyone else that you encounter. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Taurus, Venus being your ruler, has been making her way over the last 3 weeks through the part of your chart to do with partnership. Venus can be very diplomatic through that part of her journey. If you did chime with someone really well, that's something to celebrate, whether it's around a business idea or in a personal context. And if you got to know someone new, Venus moving into the 8th house could mean that the connection to you becomes deeper or perhaps even more sensual, so things could get much more intimate. But in terms of the move of Venus into Sagittarius from a financial viewpoint, if you are interested in any business or equity that is to do with overseas activities, the key is making sure that you get to the bottom of what you're considering. And the link with Pluto is going to be very helpful. Perhaps, for example, you're applying for a role in a different location. But just be conscious of the role of Uranus back in your sign, continuing its retrograde, because that's in an opposition with Venus as it arrives in your 8th house. If you haven't been feeling it, and if you feel that you've really been trying your hardest to meet someone halfway and they haven't been responsive in the way you want, I think Uranus's opposition with Venus as she lands in Sagittarius could make you think very carefully about creating some space, even if it's temporary. But as Venus travels deeper into the sign of Sagittarius and December, it is, along with Mars and the Sun, going to be clashing with your 11th house. The 11th house is very much to do with our friendships, our network, our social world, and because the 8th house is quite deep, intense, can be a little psychological, even possessive, if there is one person in your group who's quite demanding of your attention or time, or you feel somewhat controlling, I think you're going to push back against that over the next few weeks. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Gemini, Venus moving into your opposite sign of Sagittarius has a little bit of a paradox, because that's a great location for Venus to be in. It's an echo of the energy of the sign of Libra. It can be very diplomatic, collaborative, and it's where we can build up goodwill in relationships and create more harmony. So if you're in a tie which is working well, the chances are it's going to get better. But you do have Mars in this sign too, and Mars in the 7th house is a much more abrupt and abrasive influence at times, giving us a desire to be very assertive around our relationships, to the point where it can test them because it feels that the person with that wants things much more on their terms. But I think overall, particularly with the Sun in the 7th house, if you are wanting to connect with someone, perhaps romantically, maybe even if it's just in a flirty, fleeting way through a festive fling and a clench under the mistletoe, Venus in the 7th house in the free-spirited Sagittarius will certainly give you some opportunities. But relationships in the professional part of your situation could be tested. And the important thing to know is, as much as Venus can be about diplomacy, in the early parts of December, Mars is in a very challenging right angle to Saturn in that 10th house. And if you're not getting along with someone at work, however much you try to lean into what they want, it may seem to not sway them at all. And that can create a lot of frustration. So just be aware that however much you're trying to approach things in an even-handed way, you could encounter someone who's very unyielding, which could prove to be frustrating. I think the other thing that could show up in an ongoing relationship, if one of you does tend to want to have a little bit more power in the tie, not necessarily in a sinister way, but if there is one person who seems to be quite competitive about being right or making final decisions, I think that actually could start to become a little bit of a problem, and it will require some patience and tact to try to head off greater tensions between you. But sometimes in long-term relationships things ebb and flow, and there may be some ebbing and flowing going on in one of your close ties, maybe with a parent. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a boss, could be with a colleague, but there could be some politics around that issue of someone wanting to be the top dog over the next few weeks. And that's where Venus in the 7th house asks you to stay cool and always remember the things we have in common and celebrate those rather than focus so much on what makes us different. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Cancer, over the last few weeks, Venus has been travelling through a very glamorous part of your scope, which may have given you an opportunity to have some real fun with others. Venus moving into the 6th house is more earthy, it's more practical. If you're a maker or a creator and you've come up with a brilliant idea of late, the run up to Christmas is asking you to think about how you can thread that idea into something more tangible, practical, and lasting. But Venus, of course, can be about relationships, and the 6th house can be about work. So relationships with colleagues may come up from here on in a very positive way, because Venus aligns initially with Pluto in the 8th house. If you can work collaboratively with others in terms of what you can contribute, and perhaps helping each other in the busy period of the festivities, covering a shift, giving someone support, small deeds, thoughtful deeds around a romantic relationship can be really appreciated as well. What's not to like? Well, it's just that Uranus has moved into a part of your chart again where he had been through to the early part of July since March 2019, an area which is quite radical and very much to do with doing your own thing. So what you're being asked to do with Venus opposite Uranus is make sure that need to be an individual is not crushing the parts of your situation where you need to be collaborative and work on your obligations and responsibilities, which we all have. Freedom comes with responsibility, as they say. But as December goes on, because the part of your chart that's very much to do with freedom, which is the Sagittarian vibe, the 9th house, you have the North Node, Saturn and Neptune there. And they're all in turn going to be challenged by these Sagittarian energies, not just Venus, but also initially Mars and then the Sun. So if you do feel that you bend over backwards to really support other people, and sometimes at the cost to your own independence and space, you could end up becoming somewhat resentful about that. Now, it may be within the family about festive arrangements, and year after year, if you've always been the person who's provided a lot of the effort and time and investment, and other people have just taken that for granted, I think this year you're going to be asking people to do their bit in a bit more of a fulsome way. But in terms of a romantic situation, if you have met someone recently that you really like, it's possible that with Venus in Sagittarius, you need to get to know each other in a bit more of an everyday practical sense. So that may mean going to do some shopping together and just getting into those routine things. But thoughtful gestures with Venus in the 6th house can certainly help any relationship, personal or professional. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Leo, Venus moving into your sister fire sign of Sagittarius, joining it with the Sun, your ruler, and Mars, which rules the 3rd decan of your sign, is truly exciting. Also, the natal event chart that I shared earlier showed the ascendant in Leo, and that means this collective in Sagittarius is all in house 5. And that is an echo of the energy of your sign. If you have a playful love of the festive period, or you have children and their pursuits are important to you, you're in for a really joyful time. You can really go for it. One of the things that I think can come up as well, if you are someone who has got some creative ideas, when you're just chatting to people, you may be considering or discussing what you could do next year in terms of your work, because Uranus is back in the part of your chart to do with your professional connection to the world. If that has been unsettled over the last 7 years or so, it wouldn't be a surprise. So you could, even though you're enjoying some merriment and mirth, still have some pretty important conversations about how you can showcase your talents in a different way. If you are footloose and fancy free, I think your persona is really going to be burnished in a way that can draw people to you. Venus going into the 5th house is very, very glamorous. If there's someone you're involved with and it's going extremely well, the 5th house can be very romantic as well. That's delicious too. I feel perhaps the sticking point might be for people who are already in a relationship. And if you're someone who is really into all of this and having a more playful time, and your partner is more preoccupied with worrying about money, or perhaps is a bit possessive, doesn't really want you to go out and have fun, that could show up all through December because of initially Mars, then the Sun, then Venus, all clashing with Saturn, which is in a very psychological part of your scope. Or if there's part of you that perhaps is a little bit shy or inhibited about letting your hair down and really getting into it, that's something you may have to challenge yourself about over the next few weeks. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Virgo, Venus moving into the 4th house of your chart can give you a greater appreciation of your home environment, the 4th house, because Venus can be about style and taste. If you are wanting to make some last minute decorative changes, particularly if you've got some visitors come in, well, that would be completely understandable. Perhaps even ordering some new furnishings if they can be delivered before the big day. But of course Mars is in that 4th house as well, which can be a bit grumpy and defensive, to be honest, and is going to be going into a clash with Saturn in the early part of December through the first 10 or 11 days. If there's someone in your family that you're trying to set the arrangements up with who's not being very flexible and being a bit unyielding about who does and contributes what, that could really get into you, because the collective of Venus, the Sun and Mars in the 4th house is going to perhaps enhance the more sensitive side of your nature. But in a very positive sense, if you are wanting to move homes, not necessarily just change where you currently live, your desire to make that happen is going to be very strong, even though it is quite late in the year. Now, of course, Venus is about relating, the 4th house is about emotion, and the sign of Sagittarius is about truth. So I think if you are in a tie where you're not quite sure of someone's intentions, I think you're going to be a little bolder in asking where they are standing. And because you have had over the last couple of years Saturn in your 7th house, joined more recently by the North Node, and of course Neptune for a lot longer, since 2012, apart from its brief visit to Aries earlier this year, it's made you aware you've experienced perhaps some disappointments about relationships, but it's also given you a lot more confidence about asserting your boundaries. So you may encounter someone through December that, despite your sensitivity to their needs, they're not necessarily going to give that back to you in the way you want, and that can be disappointing. So just brace yourself for that. But do know, if you're single, it's going to be later in December when things get seriously flamboyant and fun for you. Things will pick up from the 15th when Mars moves into Cap. Then we have the winter solstice, the Sun into Cap on the 21st, followed by Venus on Christmas Eve. So I feel the phase from Christmas Day through to the end of the year could be a lot of fun for you. But I think some more sensitive issues, particularly around the family dimension or the emotional dimension, could show up over the next few weeks. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Libra, Venus of course is your ruler, but moving into the 3rd house, what Venus is going to amplify is your talent for diplomacy. So right through to Christmas Eve, if there are conversations to be had or ideas you want to share, the chances are you can do so with aplomb. Of course, the Sun and also the thrust of Mars are the reception committee, which is exciting. Things are going to speed up for you. You know, whether it is socially, whether it is to do with hearing from people that there's been a delay around because of Mercury's retrograde, particularly, I feel. So things can speed up, which is exciting, but your ability to connect to people in a very personable way is going to be amplified, and that's really exciting. What's to look out for? Well, as much as there can be some flirty text messages going backwards and forwards, and if you are open to online dating, Venus in the third house in Sagittarius, you can't get much better than that. But in any kind of ongoing relationship, the more obligatory side of things is highlighted by the North Node, Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Pisces. And if you do feel that however much you're prepared to discuss, negotiate and connect through all the energies in the sign of Sagittarius, which are engaged in your intellect, which is very strong, and that in some ways is resisted, and people just seem to want more from you than they're prepared to give back, that can create some chaffing, I feel. So one of the things that's important is to have the confidence to stand up for your ideas and what you believe in, the third house, and not let your natural diplomacy and perhaps inclination to avoid outright strife put you off dealing with a situation which may require you to be a bit stronger about what you will or won't do. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Scorpio, Venus emerging for your sign, you may have given yourself a glamorous makeover. You may have encountered someone new, perhaps even more than one person who showed an interest in you. But in terms of your creativity, which may have been very strong of late, Venus moving into the second house can see you wanting to convert ideas into something more tangible in terms of income. But I can assure you, Venus moving into the second solar house is often very good for a pickup in finance, so that's lovely. Of course, you have your traditional ruler Mars in reception along with the Sun, so the theme around the foundations of your world and receiving what your worth is very strong. Venus, of course, can be about diplomacy. Now, this time of the year, we often get invited to different functions. Venus in the second house could seriously test your willpower if you have been on any kind of diet. Now, I know that seems to be something we are all going to encounter when we go to a gathering and there's some delicious food on the side, but Venus in the second house can make it that much more difficult to resist. Also, the more sensual elements of a relationship can become important, but because of the collective in the sign of Pisces, which for you is to do with romance and play, the North Node's lovely there, the point of destiny. Saturn less so. Neptune, of course, can be a little bit confusing at times. Saturn in the fifth house broadly over the last couple of years has really seen you had to work hard at your talents, your creativity, but also at romance. And it may also have created some disappointments and sadness. So what I would say is if you encounter someone in the run-up to Christmas who you do really like, and it's a brand new relationship, I wouldn't splash out on an expensive gift for them, because that grand gesture, if it's not reciprocated, can really, with the square to Saturn, see you ending up feeling quite bruised. So I think it's important when it comes to the festive budget as well to try and stay within what we set. And there could be some loved ones who are tugging at your heartstrings, particularly if you've got kids, who may want that extra gift that is that much more costly. And I think you're being asked really by the collective in the sign of Pisces, not Sagittarius, to not get too caught up in people pleasing. Know what your budget is, know what your boundaries are, and know what your values are. But if you are heading out for some fun, I do think you're going to enjoy it. And I think if you can have some really lovely meals, Venus in the second house has a fantastic appreciation of that. And there could also be someone in your family or something around a property matter that could be fortunate for you over the next few weeks, with your modern ruler Pluto linking to Venus as she joins up with the sign of Sagittarius. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Sagittarius Venus moving into your sign is really exciting. You may have left a relationship recently. If you haven't, you could have been much more nostalgic about one from your past. You may have really reconsidered why that tie didn't work out. But Venus moving into your own sign brings you into the present. And one of the delicious things about Venus in the first house is it gives us a gentle celestial nudge to perhaps give our personal presentation somewhat of a glamorous makeover and refinement, which Venus is very much about. But also, if you have been thinking very carefully about some ideas you've got, they may be to do with making money, they could be to do with more creative and artistic talents you have. You're going to gain traction and confidence over the next few weeks, because not only does Venus move into your sign, you already have the Sun and the thrust of Mars. So things can start to pick up, particularly if it's felt recently that things were very bogged down and a little bit obtuse. And if a relationship has closed off, you can start again. But I feel because of the energy in Pisces, which is much more emotional, including Saturn, which hits on Mars in the first 10 days of December, then it's coming into conflict with the Sun and then Venus clashes with the distorting energies of Neptune. If you are emerging from an encounter or an involvement that was quite painful, I wouldn't push yourself too hard. This new beginning could take some time to really get seeded. But if you are wanting to get out into the social world and just have a lot of fun, and there is someone around you, could be a family member, who's a little bit critical about that, that could frustrate you, to be honest. And also there may be a part of you that doubts yourself, doubts your attractiveness, doubts your allure, doubts your talents, and that's the voice of Saturn in the fourth house. Try to not let that dent the momentum that these three players in your sign can create. And the big payoff for you is that if you are doing something that's different, fresh and dynamic in terms of expressing your individuality or abilities, by the time we get to Christmas Eve, you could get, even at this late stage in the year, a fantastic piece of news around your finances. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Capricorn, intriguingly for you, Venus has moved into the 12th house of your chart, joining up with the Sun, but also Mars. The 12th house can be about deep reflection. At this time of year, it's tricky to be deeply reflective when other people may be wanting you to join in. And I feel that if you're unsure about a relationship you're in at the moment, Venus here could see you at times just wanting to have a little bit of your own space to reflect on exactly what you want. And because of your Saturn being in the third house of thinking and communication, along with Neptune and the North Node, and because they're all going to come into conflict with not just Venus, the Sun and Mars as we go into December, if there is something that's been unspoken, perhaps by you, perhaps by someone else, it is potentially going to show itself through these next 3 weeks. Venus is a very delicate influence in the 12th house. It could make you hugely reflective, and maybe it is for people who are no longer with us, which is entirely understandable. And of course, times like Christmas can be challenging, you know, if we have had losses, and you may be very attuned to the people who were once part of your world. But of course, Venus recently has been in a very social area. Perhaps what you're looking for now in terms of your context is not so much the quantity but the quality. So sincerity is very important, but if there are any fair weather friends around you, unfortunately I have to say I think they could be revealed over the next few weeks. Or if you're unsure about someone's sincerity in terms of a relationship, or you're just reflecting on whether you want to perhaps emerge into your own space in the last phase of the year, once Mars joins you on the 15th, the Sun the 21st, Venus the 24th of December, I can assure you you're going to have a very, very dynamic time by Christmas Day through to the end of the year. But I feel the next few weeks could be a little delicate. Your moods may be a little up and down. And if there is anyone around you who tends to drain you energetically, even if someone who's a good person on the whole, it's just not they're not quite your cup of tea, or they say things that jar on your senses. So you may want to control your space a little bit over the next few weeks. And if you can, do steer clear of the more negative side of social media, because I feel that that third house energy where Saturn and Neptune is means if you read something, it could be quite triggering if you feel someone's being a little bit excluding or not very inclusive. That can just seem to grate on you that much more of an amplified way. But you have got some exciting stuff coming up later in December. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. Aquarius, there is a little bit of a dichotomy that I feel can come up over the next 3 weeks. With Venus moving into the friendliest part of your chart, which is very much to do with group activities, interactions, very social, brilliant for the festive run-up, and the link to Pluto. If there's a person that you're aligned to and you're really close, that relationship could get ever closer. But the chasm can be because of the energy in the second house of your chart, including your traditional ruler Saturn. And Saturn's going to test Mars initially, the Sun, and then Venus right throughout December. So if there is someone around you who's got different values to you, those could show up very strongly. It may be a difference about finance, to be honest. In a romantic context, perhaps one of you wants to spend different amounts of money in terms of gifts. That could be an issue. But if you are in a romantic relationship, I think Venus in the 11th house certainly asks us to remember the things that we have in common. And one of the greatest things in any romance is the friendship element of it. And if you do have similar values, they can be strengthened. If you are not quite so much on the same celestial page, I think that can be highlighted too, to be honest. But if you really want to get out and have some fun, meet up with lots of different types of people, you're set for a very playful time right up to Christmas Eve. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link. So Pisces, for you, Venus moves to the very top of your chart, joining up with the Sun, but also Mars. Mars has been giving you perhaps a bit more confidence to really speak your mind, particularly to do with your work, and your leadership abilities and your authority have been enhanced. But perhaps also you've been a little more frank in a way that people aren't quite used to. What Venus is great for, really, is a foil for Mars. So Mars can be, if you like, the steel fist, and Venus can be the velvet glove. So it just brings a little bit of softness and refinement to your message. So if you are needing to interact with some important people, you're having some job interviews or doing some presentations, I think Venus arriving here is really going to be very helpful to you. What it can also do in terms of a long-term relationship, if you'd like to take it to that next level of commitment, you could find with your partner that you are talking about a property matter if you don't live together already or you're not spliced. And also a connection to a partner's parents can be something that comes much more into view as well. But there is a lot of energy in your sign through the North Node, Saturn and Neptune. And one of the things you may have to toggle over the next few weeks is your need to be an individual against where you need to fit in, particularly if it's in a big organisation, a corporate structure, or with those aforementioned family members who may have a more traditional view of life that doesn't quite chime with the part of you that wants to be you on your terms alone. So it could be a little bit of chaff in there, but on the whole, even at this late part of the year, if you're wanting to seize a golden prize, you have a huge opportunity over the next 4 weeks, as long as you don't want everything exactly on your own terms. If you're yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive video, please see under this video for the link.